Good afternoon. We're at the Henry Carter Hall Library in Clinton, Connecticut. It's Monday, November 1st, 2021, and we're here today to talk with Glenn Smith, who's going to tell us about his experience in the Army. And Glenn, welcome. Glenn is also a member of the Clinton Police Department, so he gives service to this day. So thank you for, today we're going to focus on your service to the country before and so on. So when did you go into the service?
I went into the service right out of high school in 1987, believe it or not. Feels like forever. I went right out of high school and actually enlisted in the United States Air Force active duty for 4 years.
Okay. And so what appealed to you about the Air Force?
To be very honest, I actually wanted to join the Marines like my dad. My dad was a Marine in Vietnam. My grandfather had been in the World War II. So I had high aspirations of going into the Marines, and my dad actually told me, he goes, go learn a trade while you're in. He goes, I didn't really learn a lot. He goes, so look at other branches. And so I went to the Air Force, and they went into the Air Force because they were the only ones that would allow me to be a police officer right out of basic training for 4 years. All the other branches said you would have to do something else, or we could not guarantee you to be a police officer. And that's what I wanted to do, because my ultimate end game was to get out and go into law enforcement. And a state trooper many years ago told me, you need to go into the military and be a police officer. So that was my end goal, and the Air Force guaranteed me that job. So with that, I signed up to go into the Air Force. I wasn't looking to, but they gave me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do for the longest.
Beautiful. Now, where did you go for basic training?
Basic training for the Air Force is down in Lackland Air Force Base, down in San Antonio, Texas. So I went to one of the hottest parts of the country. In early fall, it was very warm still back then, but it was at southern Texas. It was fantastic location, loved it. Didn't love basic training itself, but once I graduated, I felt like, and as an 18-year-old kid, I actually accomplished something in my life that was one of the hardest things that I would ever have to do. You're away from your family. There's people screaming and yelling at you. They shave your head. You're constantly being told you're not good at what you're doing, and it's a mind game. And ultimately, when I graduated after 6 weeks, I had accomplished something, first big thing in my life that I felt like I had accomplished in my life. So I was very proud of what I had done.
So then they sent you for further training?
Yes, I went to MP school, which was also in Lackland Air Force
Okay.
Base. So I stayed there for another 4 weeks. Then I did 3 weeks of training with the Army. So for a total of 7 weeks. That training was up in New Jersey. And then I got my first duty assignment. Then after that, you get sent to your first duty station. And mine was actually, believe it or not, was in the Republic of Panama, the country of Panama. Back when General Manuel Noriega was in power. I got there just before all the problems started brewing down there with him and our George Bush and then the United States. And we eventually, while I had just left the country, they eliminated him and took him out of power about 3 months after I left the country. But while I was down there was a lot of intense moments for a 19, 20-year-old kid with, guns being pointed at each other and armed people outside of our base. And it was a very trying time, but it was what I trained to do. So for me, I actually got to, experience, doing what I was trained to do and to defend my base. And so it was exciting to me. I was very happy. So, I did, that was and then after I left Panama, I ended my time in Colorado at a top secret base. I got a top secret clearance, and I was there to guard a satellite base that, during Desert Storm, sent a beam over into the country from the United States. And when the people remember the Scud missiles that were launched against us, our base was one of the ones that made an umbrella over there to alert the troops on the ground to don their gas masks and to prepare for an attack. My base that I was at, this little tiny base in Colorado, was one of the ones that was sending a protective beam over to the. So I did I had a wild, for a young guy, I had a very active 4 years of active duty time when I didn't think I would really see a lot, and I basically went through Desert Shield, Desert Storm, And I went to Panama and was down there when Noriega was in power and there was armed conflicts with him. So it was a wild 4 years. And then I got out and thought I was done with the military. Little did I know that it was just the beginning. I ended up joining the reserves. I missed, every guy gets out and then you miss it. It's in your blood. Anybody that's a lifer in the military, you miss it. So I literally was home for 6 months looking for a job, and then I realized I missed it. So I joined the National Air Reserves, which, and I used to go up to, I was up in Westover Air Force Base, Air Reserve Base up in Massachusetts, and I did that for 4 years. And then at that point I decided to, I got out and took 9 years off. Didn't do anything in the military for 9 years, and then decided to join the Army National Guard to serve my state.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I joined the unit here in Connecticut back in 2005, just before Hurricane Katrina.
Oh my.
And literally I got in June or July, and by September I was down in Louisiana. Connecticut sent a company down to help out with, at the time Katrina just devastated. And we got sent to go down there, and we helped at locations where people that were displaced, and centers for giving out just, like the Red Cross. We helped assist them with security and helped to keep people safe and protected from, just issues when they were displaced from their home. And I spent almost a month down in Louisiana. Awesome people. That was probably one of my all-time favorite things to go do. We actually helped Americans. We helped our own, through a very trying time, and those people were the most amazing, generous people to us. Everybody was so thankful to see us. They were always like, try to have dinner or try to buy us something. And I'm like, you people are displaced. You don't have a home. Your house. And they're so very friendly. One of the nicest group of people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
And so it was just a rocket. I felt like I was on a rocket ship, because literally after I got out of, we got home from Katrina, I got orders to go to Iraq. I got Super Bowl Sunday of 2006, so I got home in like October of 2005. By February of 2006, I was activated with the National Guard to full-time duty status, and we were deployed. Our unit from Connecticut was deployed to Iraq.
Oh my goodness, tell me about that.
We
were you there as an MP?
We went over as we did go over as an MP support company to help out the infantry who were, we were support. We were a support element. But ultimately, when we got there, our job was to help train Iraqi police officers, which was right in my alley. As a field training officer here in Clinton, we were over there to help train the Iraqi soldiers and help to make them better to be able to defend and do their, protect their country and fight crime. And the thing was over there is the kind of crime that they were dealing with was outside elements like Al-Qaeda and terrorists. They weren't driving around per se like we do here in Clinton in Iraq, patrolling the streets. They were over there out actively looking for terrorists and, bomb makers and people that were trying to do harm to their country. So we went along with them as their support element. So realistically, we didn't really do a lot of normal training like you would here with handcuffing and things like that. It was more combat operations. We were out actively looking for Al-Qaeda and terrorists, and it was kind of a surreal thing coming from a National Guard unit. We thought we were going to be maybe sitting on a base, running radar on a base, stopping U.S. soldiers or something for speeding or things like that, and little did we know that we would be going out into the city of Mosul. I was in northern Iraq, in the city of Mosul, which was the second biggest city, and the time that we arrived was right when the surge, when President Bush sent in about an extra 80 to 100,000 troops. I think there was a high number of troops were sent into the country to try to rout out, Al-Qaeda and the terrorist networks that were kind of starting to take over and kind of, we called it pushing back, so against us and the Iraqi government. So we brought in a big, massive they brought in a big surge, and we were over there while that was going on, and we ran a year. We were there in Iraq for a full year, ran 320-something missions outside of our base out. And the cool part was, this was probably the wildest thing that I will always remember, is while we were there, we got to work with Special Forces. Special Forces unit actually came around and were looking for a unit. Special Forces, they operate in small numbers, and they needed a support element. Well, it didn't sound like a really exciting thing to some of our higher ups, so our platoon, our 30-something guys got tasked out with, believe it or not, working with and being the support element for special operations, a special operations unit that was down there, and we basically went with them out on missions when they went to go look for people that were making IEDs, planting IEDs, guys that were planning, terrorist acts or attacks on bases down there. So we kind of went out with them, and we were eliminating and getting what they called high-value targets, which were, like I said, the brains and the muscle sometimes of Al-Qaeda. And we were going out with them on missions, and we went out with them for like 15 or 20 missions while we were there. And it was really, really like surreal to be meeting up with guys, like that you see on the news, or, you watch the SEAL Team 6 TV show, and we were actually going out with guys that were special operations, and, we were working with them. So it was very surreal, because here you are thinking we might be doing nothing, and we did a lot of stuff in the year that I was there.
Wow. It occurs to me you must have a particular appreciation for training, and then after working with the SEAL team, whose training is
Yes.
so intense, and
Yes.
you must have learned from them in ways that other airmen wouldn't have had that opportunity if they hadn't.
The thing that you notice about them is their attention to detail. Their training is, they don't train like halfway. Their training is, they talk to us, and we didn't actually train hard with them, but we got to watch them and learn from them when we were prepping for these missions, what the attention to detail of what each guy was doing, and it didn't matter what their rank was. There was people with lower ranks that were in positions that were more important than the guys with more rank, and it was very kind of surreal to watch these guys, because everything they did, they understood that if you did something wrong, because they were such a small group, that if somebody did something wrong or didn't do their job the right way, bad things could happen to them. So we worked with them very early on. So we took that for the rest of our deployment to realize, as we worked, and then when we didn't work with them, about that. Like, everything was, you gotta be very careful about what you're doing. You need to be good at what you're doing. You need to be paying attention. You need to, if this was your job, as boring as it was, you needed to do it, because if you didn't do it right, something bad could happen to the rest of us. And so I think what they taught us was, like I said, attention to detail, and to remember that, training isn't, you don't do it halfway. You do it like, you train like you're going to do the mission. And that kind of sunk in with us and was very beneficial to us, because while I was in Iraq, fortunately, we didn't lose no soldiers were killed from our particular unit. Other units had soldiers that were, but our particular company from Connecticut, we didn't lose one soldier while we were there. We had guys get injured and stuff, but nobody, luckily died. So that was huge, because that doesn't always happen, especially in such a climate that we were in, with such a high tempo. There was a lot of IED attacks on us. We had a lot of issues while we were over there. Unfortunately, we came home. Everybody came home okay.
What about language barriers in terms of being? Were there interpreters? How do you get the lay of the land in a country?
Some of the interpreters actually speak English, is taught to a lot of them, and for them to want to work with the Americans, A lot of them learned English. A lot of them told us they learned it from watching movies.
Okay,
They
yeah.
watched a lot of movies, so a
Okay.
lot of them like had like dirty, hairy phrases and stuff. It was funny, but no, a lot of them were very well educated, and our interpreters, they were everything. They were, so to see everything that's going on now with having left, because I was also in Afghanistan, having left people behind, these interpreters, it's very frustrating to me because these people put their lives on the line for us. They put their families' lives on the line because Al-Qaeda and, all these terrorist groups, they don't like that you work with Americans. So the fact that they were doing this, we needed to protect them and take care of them because they were so supportive of us, didn't like, Saddam Hussein, they didn't like, terrorists in their country. They wanted their country to be
Live in peace.
peaceful like most other countries, and they sacrificed. So the things that they did was coming and working with us 5, 6, 7 days a week, being away from their families for extended periods of time. They were everything to us because obviously we didn't know the language, and we had to, they were right there beside us with anything that went on. They were willing to sacrifice themselves as well to help us because they were working with us because they knew we had a common goal of trying to get rid of Saddam and the bad people that were still in Iraq at the time when I was there.
And then you went to Afghanistan.
I thought I was done, and then 2012, and I was not a young man at that point. I was 42, almost 43 years old. My unit got activated again, and I didn't have to go, but because I'd already deployed once in the state of Connecticut. The governor said at the time if you did one deployment. The problem is the guys I was training with before we got word that we were going to be activated to potentially go to Afghanistan. You form a bond with these people. I had young guys that had never deployed in my unit, and I was the old seasoned grizzly veteran, as I like to call it. And I actually had 2 buddies that I deployed to Iraq with that were in the unit with me, and they came to me and they go, Smitty, going to Afghanistan, man, you gotta go with us, we gotta go. And I waited hard in my mind, leaving my family again and going back to a combat zone, and I was like, do I do this? And I just looked at all the young faces that were in the unit and how, young and green, as we like to use the term green, like a banana, they weren't ripe yet. And a part of me was like, I had an obligation to go. I felt this very strong obligation to go. So I said yes, and we went and left to go to Afghanistan in 2012 to 2013. And we were deployed to southeastern Afghanistan in Ghazni province, which was very close to the Pakistani border. So we got over there, and our unit was tasked out at a very small, very remote area. We were at a site where there was only like 100 soldiers in the middle of nowhere, and that was our base. We lived in very primitive conditions.
How did you get supplies?
They were flown in by helicopter. We did get stuff trucked in, but it was far and few between. We most of the stuff you travel around there is mostly by helicopter, and it's just the easiest form and the safest because of the road. They only have like one major roadway that's paved, and it was prone to having improvised exploded devices, IEDs, all over it. One of our trucks ended up getting hit by an IED one time when we went to go to another base to get resupplied and get some, get vehicles, taken care of. And so flying was the best way to get around the country. So that's how we got our supplies up to where we were at. And our job there was very similar to what it was in Iraq. We were there to help the Afghan police continue what they had already been building on. And unfortunately, how quickly the country collapsed, recently is very frustrating to see for a lot of us because of all the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that we put into the country, to just see it, give up so quickly, because, try to come take the United States over, and you're gonna be fighting every 10 feet. There's probably somebody that's gonna be fighting to defend it because it's our country, and so for me to watch the country just give up to the Taliban as quickly and easy, or ISIS-K as they did, it was it was frustrating, and it was hurtful too, you
The
know,
geography of that country is,
brutal.
yeah,
Brutal, 7,000 feet. It was, we trained out in Texas, or western Texas at El Paso, Fort Bliss, and that base was probably 50-something, 100 feet above, so it was a little over a mile, because I was in Denver too, when I, you know, like I told you, but 5,200, we went to Afghanistan, the particular location we were in, it was like 7,000, 7,100 feet up, and to be very honest with you, you can't train for that. It's unbelievable when you actually get there and try to walk and breathe and just.
Do you have oxygen constantly, or?
You adjust to it. The
Okay.
body will adjust. Iraq was 135 when I was over there at points in the summer. You know, you're in a truck that has no air conditioning. You learn to adjust. Afghanistan it felt like somebody was standing on your chest for the first few weeks, but you eventually learn to. With all your gear, you gotta learn to adapt to it, because you have to wear the gear and you need to do your job. So the human body is an amazing thing, but Afghanistan was altitude-wise, it was similar to around here. They had a spring, we had rain, you know, they had a winter, they got snow. It was like 4 seasons, believe it or not. Summer was very warm. We left before the summer really took hold, but I mean, we heard about it, but we were there for spring and winter and fall, and it was interesting. It was a very interesting country to be in, you know, much more primitive than Iraq. I thought Iraq was, you know, a kind of a rough, beat, rundown place, but Afghanistan makes Iraq look like a modern
Wow.
day country compared to it. It was so primitive in, you know, in their ways.
Talk about your commanders. Did you have whenever you were deployed, did you have a commander whose style and approach and absolutely resonated with you? It really was exactly what you would want in a leader? Or someone who didn't?
We had, well, to be very honest with you, when we were in Iraq, a lot of the missions that we ran were driven at the lowest level, at squad level, like a sergeant's level.
Oh.
I deployed with, one of the guys that stands out to me, a couple people, was a Sergeant, J.D. McCauley. He was a young kid that went over with me. He was my roommate, so I'm a little biased to him. I liked the kid, and I called him a kid because he was 22 when we went over there. But we had an issue where one of our, somebody in a higher in our rank had a little issue, and they had to relieve him of his post. And that put JD basically to be in charge of the squad. So he went from being a young kid to now in charge of like 10 or 12 people. And I was amazed by his poise and his ability to just, you know, be a good soldier and inspire people, do the job of a guy that was like my age, you
Wow.
know, 30s and his, you know, late 30s, early 40s, and these kids doing it at 22. You know, when I deployed to Afghanistan, our platoon leader was a lieutenant, young kid, 24 years old. You know, I mean, I was 42, so I'm like, I could have been his dad.
Yeah.
And he was a young guy, and when we went over there, he was like a typical 24-year-old. Like, you know, he acted, even though he was supposed to be in charge of the platoon as the platoon leader. But the thing about, his name was Lieutenant Sanford, Matthew Sanford, like I said, and the big thing that sticks out with him, for me, was while we were over there, his mother passed from cancer and he had to leave to go home. Most units, they told him, you don't have to come back to Iraq. You don't have, or Afghanistan. You don't have to come back. You know, if you need to stay home for your family, you know, you don't have to come back. It was basically what they were telling him. There won't be any penalties, or you wouldn't be looked down for not coming back to the unit. The kid went home for a few weeks to spend time with his dad and, you know, and take care of burying his mother. And he came back.
Wow.
And he finished out his deployment, and he was a good, and I don't know how I would have reacted if I was in his position at his age. I mean, I'm older now. When I was there, I probably could have dealt with it, but he dealt with the loss of his mother as a young guy, and yet he still felt strongly enough that when he came back, he goes, I couldn't leave you guys here without being here with you guys, no matter what happened, because what if something happened and I wasn't here? And so I give him a lot of credit for doing what he did and coming over and coming back after he didn't have to, so.
That was great. Communications, now, how, Iraq, Afghanistan, how were you able to, and especially in Afghanistan, when you were in this
Yes.
incredibly small, isolated place, could you communicate with your family here, and how?
Yes. The funny part was when I went for my first deployment, you know, like when I went overseas, when I was in the Air Force, wrote letters
Yeah.
to my parents, you know, and my family. And I could call home, but you'd use a payphone. I would stand in a hallway on a payphone, and it was not cheap. We'd have to buy cards, and I mean, I was like $1.50 a minute to talk home. I mean, I had some very expensive phone bills for calling home to my family. So fast forward to Iraq and Afghanistan, they have call centers where they had phones and computers.
Oh, whoa.
And you could literally, the time difference was about eight or 9 hours ahead when we were in Afghanistan. So you just had to be able to coordinate what time you might have to get up or stop what you were doing unless you were on a mission to go and call home.
Yeah.
You know, so for example, calling home at dinner time for the home might be 1 o'clock in the morning. So I just have to get up and go over to the call center, and you wait your time and get on the phone. And even though Afghanistan was remote, they did make the effort to have computers, about 6 computers and about 5 phones that we could use.
Wow.
And call home, and we got, you know, phone cards issued to us, or we could go and buy stuff online where you had credit. It would tell you have 48 minutes left, you know, and you could use this. And so you did. You tried to keep up with the home front as much as you can, but you're also 7,000 miles away, so you also have to realize sometimes there's not things you can do for your family because you're so far away. But that's, fortunately for me, I had a very strong support system. My in-laws, my parents, my grandparents, my siblings were around to help out while I was deployed. So I had a very strong support system around me so that I could concentrate on doing what I had to do, which was doing my job and coming home.
Good, good. What, if you had to tell people who had never served in the military, what do you want, would you want them to know that they probably just don't quite understand? Or what do you want them to understand about what it means to have served, or to serve?
For me, the thing that I try to have people understand from having served your country, which to me is the ultimate honor. It was an honor for me to be in the military. I wish I did 20 and a half years, you know, between active duty. I wish I was young enough to do another 25 or 30. I mean, it's something that, for me, it's the ultimate. So what I kind of tell people nowadays, or especially now with everything that's going on in the world and in our country, the freedoms that we have are not something that should never be assumed. We could very easily have been a country like so many others in the world that are occupied or run by regimes or taken over by other countries. So freedom, it's a cliche, is not free. And we need people that will continue to have the same ideas, that to protect this country and to stand up for this country and what we believe it to be, which is a country that you can come here and be anything you want. The one thing that I always noticed whenever I was in other countries, you never hear anybody talk about it's the Afghani dream, or I want to have the Iraqi dream, or the Russian dream, or the Chinese. It's always, I want to go to America. And there's a reason why people want to come to America, because when you've been to these other countries, you realize just how lucky we are to live in the greatest country in the world. And so I guess the thing is, I tell people that haven't served or just assume that what people in the military do, it's a thankless, long-houred, you know, out in places that some people don't want to go, other go places that people don't want to go, but they enjoy the benefits of people that served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam. this country is the way it is, and it allows you to have the opportunity to have free thought and to disagree about topics, is because we have allowed it by having people make huge sacrifices in order to allow us to be the country that we are. And it's a tough spot right now, but I think people see and realize just how lucky we are. And so I guess the thing is, it's not free. Freedom is not free, and it never will be unless we have people willing to stand up for it and defend it.
Do you think, having been, I mean, you had a focus on police services even before you joined. Has it coalesced, your service in the military and then your services in law enforcement and civilian life? Is it a great trajectory?
The only really difference is here, like when I was overseas, was we catered to trying to help a country, get up on their feet. Here, our job is to help, so here on a daily basis, the difference is I make a lasting impact on fellow Americans every day, fellow, people from Clinton. So I think both of them are very similar in what you have to do as far as attention to detail, being somewhere on time, and things like that. But I think that's probably what drew me to law enforcement, was the fact that military is, there's sort of a regimented way about it. And so I enjoy, the aspect that at least when I'm doing my job in Clinton as a police officer, I'm helping US citizens, directly at that moment in their time of need. Overseas, we're helping other countries to try to get up to it that they may never get to where we are. So at least when I'm here in the United States, when I do stuff, I get to see the benefits of what I've done almost immediately with a thank you, or somebody will come up to you and go, yeah, you arrested me 3 years ago, I was doing drugs, or I was doing this, and I cleaned up my act after you arrested me, and it's, I'm a better person. And so for me, at least in law enforcement in the United States, unlike in the military, I get to help my fellow US, citizens immediately, directly, and I get to see it right away. Maybe someday in Iraq, there'll be somebody to go, there was an American soldier that helped me out, and I'm now the president of Iraq, and I'm gonna make Iraq a better place. That may happen. At least here I can see it directly when I see kids, or I help somebody. There is an immediate, I get to reap my rewards of what I did or didn't do.
Beautiful. And Glenn, when people say thank you for your service, how does that resonate with you?
It's funny, you ask, I could probably wheel in about 20 guys that were in my unit with me, and they'll all tell you the same thing. It's humbling, and it's embarrassing, because you appreciate it. I mean, it's the nicest thing anybody could say, thank you for your service. It is, but as a soldier, you never look at it as you doing it for a thank you. You do it. Every guy that I was ever with did it, for whatever reason. But ultimately, you never want to be. You like being thanked, but it's sort of you feel embarrassed that somebody's thanking you for doing something that you enjoy doing. And I used to say, no, thank you for allowing me to be a soldier. I mean, it was the greatest. Like I said, I mean, next to having children, serving my country and serving the community that I grew up in. I grew up in Clinton. It's those things in order. I mean, your family, and then then serving my country and serving my town has been the greatest honor. I mean, I wish I could do it forever. Unfortunately, we have to get old and we can't keep doing it, and we have to retire, and then we just get to wear the veteran hat and go to parades. But when people say it, I'm always very thankful and appreciative of it. But it's always just so humbling and sort of embarrassing, because you're like, I love what I do. I'm so honored to do it. So it's like I don't even feel like I need a thank you for what I do.
Glenn, thank you so much. There's anything else you would like to say?
You know, to be very honest, with Veterans Day coming up,
Yeah.
the best thing I will tell you is when you see somebody on Veterans Day, go thank that vet, especially the guys that were in Vietnam, and things like that. Go up, ask them about what they did, talk to them. A lot of guys will like to talk about it. They will never tell you about it, but if you do ask, grandkids, children of veterans, you might find out some incredible stories that you didn't know about your grandfather or your father or your great-great-grandfather. But on Veterans Day coming up, please, you know, thank a vet. You know, if you see him, buy him a cup of coffee, you know, and just, you know, look out for them. And, you know, and again, if you know of somebody that's in trouble, again, there's help out there for those guys too. That's another thing. A lot of guys with, you know, suicides and just being lonely, we're out there. There's VA centers, there's things like that out there. Please, you know, don't hesitate to try to help somebody out in trouble. And if you don't, ask a local law enforcement officer. They might have been a vet themselves and, you know, help out those in need as well, because there's a lot of veterans out there that need some help as well. But thank you for having me. It was my honor to come talk to you today.
It was my honor to talk to you. Thank you, Glenn.